Have you ever thought about what makes a psychological thriller truly get under your skin?
Oh, all the time.
Right. Like, is it the monster lurking in the shadows waiting to strike? Or is it the psychological wreckage that's left behind when the monster finally walks away and the survivors have to somehow make sense of what they just saw?
I mean, for me, it usually comes down to the violation of rules.
Yeah,
A jump scare startles you, sure, but true dread sets in when the fundamental logic of the world that these characters rely on is just completely shattered.
absolutely.
The anticipation builds the tension, but that aftermath, that cognitive dissonance, is what actually stays with you.
That is such a compelling way to frame it, and it is the absolute perfect lens for the focus of today's deep dive.
I am so excited for this one.
Same here. We're doing a full dissection of a masterclass in narrative suspense. For those of you following along, we are looking at Episode 6, titled The Breath of the Machine, from the legendary 1964 serial story, The Butcher of the Bottoms.
It is a remarkable piece of storytelling. It really pioneered a lot of the tropes we see in modern thrillers today.
Oh, without a doubt.
And to help us analyze the craft behind this major turning point, we've pulled together an incredible stack of sources.
The archives are wide open today.
Exactly. We're looking at the original 1964 series Bible, which lays out the entire architectural framework of this fictional universe. We also have access to the in-universe materials.
Which are so immersive.
They really are. We've got the restricted field hospital triage reports, Document W, the grisly physical evidence logs from the crime scene, Document X, those deeply unsettling forensic sketches in Document Z.
And don't forget Document Y.
Right, Document Y, the confidential interview transcript conducted by an investigative reporter.
So our mission for you today is custom tailored to guide you through the anatomy of a perfect narrative pivot. We're going to deconstruct the trauma the main characters experience, look at the physical evidence left at the scene, and examine the horrifying realization of what the antagonist has truly built.
We want to understand how the writers manipulate our sense of safety.
Exactly.
And my role will be to synthesize these clues. We want to dig underneath the plot to explain not just what happens, but why these specific narrative choices are so incredibly effective at manipulating both the characters within the story and you, the audience, sitting at home.
Okay, let's unpack this by dropping right into the immediate aftermath of the ninth floor standoff.
It's such a heavy scene.
It really is. If you know the series, you know the setting is everything. It's 1964 in Kansas City. The massive floodwaters are finally receding, leaving behind this thick, suffocating layer of river silt over literally everything.
Just mud and decay everywhere.
Right. And detectives Jack Sullivan and Marcus Thorne have just barely survived this harrowing standoff in the dark on the ninth floor observation deck of the Livestock Exchange.
The atmosphere established in the production notes is crucial here. The series Bible explicitly describes 1964 Kansas City as existing in a post-Pendergast vacuum.
Which is a great historical touch.
It really grounds it. For some historical context, the Pendergast machine was a real, deeply entrenched political and mafia alliance that essentially ran Kansas City for decades.
And when that machine finally collapsed,
It left a massive power vacuum. The city in this story is transitioning from a world of highly organized, predictable corruption to a modern era of unpredictable civil unrest.
yeah.
And the hub of all this unease is the West Bottoms. It's this sprawling, muddy, industrial labyrinth of livestock pens, abandoned grain silos, and forgotten Prohibition-era smuggling tunnels.
That setting does so much heavy lifting.
Yeah.
The place where things are meant to be slaughtered and forgotten. So up on that observation deck in the pitch black, the lightning flashes.
The big reveal.
Yes, and the reveal isn't a guy with a knife. It isn't your traditional monster. The triage notes describe what they saw illuminated in that flash as a miracle of the macabre.
What a phrase.
Sully and Marcus went up there expecting to find a corpse, or maybe corner the killer. Instead, they found a massive biological assembly.
Let's look at Document W, the restricted field hospital report from October 22nd, 1964. It was taken at the temporary triage set up on the 12th Street Viaduct. It gives us a clinical breakdown of the immediate physical and psychological state of the detectives.
Physically, both men are suffering from acute respiratory distress.
Right. They inhaled heavy formaldehyde fumes on that ninth floor, which really grounds the scene in this awful chemical reality.
You can almost smell it reading the notes.
Yeah.
But reading through them, the psychological damage is clearly the real focus.
Definitely. Consider Detective Sully. The lore describes Jack Sullivan as this 54-year-old chain-smoking relic.
The classic hardballed cop.
Exactly. He represents the old KCPD. He knows the local mob referred to as the outfit, and he has a highly flexible moral compass. He is comfortable with a certain type of violence.
Yeah, but the triage report notes that post-standoff, Sully is completely catatonic.
Completely unresponsive.
He is non-communicative, just staring blankly out at the swollen river. But why does this specific event break him so thoroughly? I mean, he's seen bodies before. He's worked homicide for decades in a mob town.
Because it offends his basic sense of order.
Ah, okay.
Sully understands a hitman pulling a trigger for money. He understands a crime of passion. He can compartmentalize human cruelty when it has a familiar motive.
But biological experimentation is completely outside his worldview.
Exactly. Grafting human and animal parts together. That shatters his reality. The old KCPD morality, as flexible as it was, simply has no framework to process a monster who views flesh as building materials. It's the violation of rules we talked about earlier.
That makes total sense. He's staring at the river because the world he knew just washed away.
Exactly.
But then you look at Detective Marcus Thorne, and his reaction is the polar opposite. Marcus is 32, college-educated, highly forensic-minded, and acutely aware of his isolation as one of the only black homicide detectives in the department.
He's a very different kind of cop.
Right. He doesn't shut down. The triage notes indicate he is hyper-fixated. He is obsessively tapping his fingers against the metal desk in the medical tent.
What's fascinating here is the specific source of that rhythm. The medical notes explain that when the power was cut during the standoff, the sound that the biological masterpiece made in the dark wasn't a human death rattle.
It was a mechanical failure.
Yes. Marcus is tapping his desk in perfect time with the mechanical bellows they found. He didn't hear a person dying. He heard a machine physically failing to breathe.
That is wild. I want you to put yourself in Marcus's shoes for a moment. You are a detective trying to save a victim. You hear breathing in the dark.
Terrifying.
But when the lights go out, the breathing winds down with the hiss of depressurizing valves and the squeak of leather bladders. The realization that the person you are trying to save has been mechanically reconstructed is a phenomenal piece of horror writing.
It really is.
And it's compounded by the fact that Thorne insists he recognized the facial structure of the subject, but the surgical grafting was so extensive he couldn't make a positive ID.
It weaponizes Marcus's greatest strength against him.
Oh, that's a great point.
He is the forensic expert. He is meant to look at a body and find answers. Here, he looks at a body and only finds impossible, horrific questions.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the narrative doesn't just leave us with their trauma. It gives us the physical receipts.
Document X.
Yes. Let's pivot to the evidence log from the 9th floor recovery to see exactly what broke these men.
The first item on the log is the machinery itself. They recovered a modified iron lung prototype. We have to remember the era here.
Right, the 1950s.
During the height of the polio epidemics, iron lungs were massive, room-sized, negative-pressure ventilators. People lived inside these giant metal cylinders.
But the evidence log describes a modified, portable version that the killer had directly integrated with organic tissue using valves and industrial tubing.
Imagining the aesthetics of that is rough. It's the marriage of mid-century medical brutalism with slaughterhouse leftovers.
And right next to that machine, the forensics team found a heavily blood-stained fragment of a surgical journal. The wording on this scrap is so incredibly deliberate.
What does it say again?
It reads, "The heart of a mobster, the lungs of a choir girl, the soul of a city. It lives because I willed it." Marcus saw the eyes. He knows.
I want to zero in on the use of the word willed. Why do you think the writers chose that specific verb instead of built or made?
It feels distinctly religious. You build a machine, but you will something into existence.
Huh.
It speaks to extreme arrogance.
Precisely. It gives us the core of the antagonist's psychology. The butcher isn't a typical serial killer motivated by impulse, revenge, or base urges.
No, not at all.
The series Bible identifies him as Dr. Eris Thorne, a disgraced surgeon who vanished into the criminal underground in 1961. And to clarify, the lore notes he is of no relation to Detective Marcus Thorne.
Which just adds an eerie coincidence to their dynamic.
Completely. The killer's motive is listed purely as biological architecture.
He views himself as a deity. He's not destroying life. In his twisted mind, he is creating it. He is taking the discarded pieces of the city, a corrupt mobster, an innocent choir girl, livestock from the bottoms, and playing God.
And notice the taunt at the end of the journal scrap. Marcus saw the eyes. He knows.
He's so arrogant.
He isn't just experimenting in the shadows. He is performing. He specifically engineered this gruesome discovery to speak directly to the one detective smart enough to comprehend the scale of his work.
Which brings us to Document Z, the forensic sketch in the case file. This is such a brilliant narrative device.
Because he drew it himself.
Right. Usually a police sketch is drawn by an artist based on a witness description, but Marcus drew this masterpiece himself, purely from memory, sitting in that triage tent.
The notes attached to the drawing describe the figure as terrifyingly symmetrical. It isn't a haphazard Frankenstein monster. It's a precise, calculated fusion of multiple victims from the earlier episodes.
And the incisions aren't crude. They are held together with what the notes call invisible silk ties.
The meticulous surgical perfection of it makes it so much worse than if it were just a bloody mess.
It implies time, patience, and a sterile focus happening right in the middle of a muddy, flooded slaughterhouse district. But it's Marcus's margin notes scribbled on the edge of the sketch that really pivot the genre of the story.
Those notes gave me chills.
He wrote, "It wasn't a person, it was a map. He's building a new version of us. He's not Eris Thorne, he's something Eris Thorne became."
That realization is the exact moment the scope of the thriller expands. The writers are telling the audience that the antagonist has transcended his former human identity.
The disgraced surgeon hiding in the mud is gone.
He has evolved into a fully realized architect of his own twisted vision, and the heroes are miles behind him.
I love that you bring up how he's perceived, because that perfectly sets up the next crucial piece of the story. We need to talk about the investigative reporter, Eleanor Vance.
Oh, she's phenomenal.
Her role completely recontextualizes the kind of monster we're dealing with. Let's look at Document Y.
Eleanor is vital to the structure of the series. She is 30 years old, working for the Kansas City Star. The production Bibles refer to her character archetype as the public eye.
Because the police aren't looking?
Exactly. While Sully and the KCPD are actively trying to ignore the missing persons cases from the West Bottoms because they assume it's just transient workers or mob violence, Eleanor is the one actually putting the pieces together.
She is relentless, and she manages to secure a confidential interview with Mrs. Dorothy Hayes, the mother of a young woman named Martha who vanished in Episode 3.
The police had completely dismissed the mother.
But Eleanor sits down with her, shows genuine empathy, and gently pushes for details. And Mrs. Hayes drops a revelation that completely shifts the ground under the audience's feet.
It is revealed that the killer actually spoke to the families before taking his victims.
He didn't just stalk Martha in an alley. He visited Mrs. Hayes' home a full week before the abduction.
Hiding in plain sight.
And he doesn't introduce himself as Dr. Thorne. He introduces himself as the curator. Mrs. Hayes tells Eleanor that he was polite, well-dressed, but he carried a deeply wrong scent.
He didn't smell like a sterile hospital.
No, he smelled like the stockyards, like old blood and wet wool.
Imagine the visceral violation of that. The horror trope of the slasher relies on the fear of the unknown lurking outside your window. The writers here subvert that entirely.
Yeah.
The monster is sitting on your sofa, drinking tea from your good china, smelling like a slaughterhouse, and having a polite conversation with you about your child.
It's deeply unsettling. And the conversation he has with her isn't a threat. It's a sales pitch.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the central thematic pillar of the entire series, which the writers defined as behavioral probability, or simply the odds.
Right, the odds.
The overarching concept is that the curator views human existence purely through statistical risk. Every choice we make, walking down a dark street, leaving a window unlatched, trusting a stranger, is analyzed through the mathematical likelihood of survival versus death.
We all calculate odds every day, right? We lock our doors at night to lower the odds of a break-in. We look both ways before crossing the street.
We do.
The curator just weaponizes that basic human instinct.
Exactly. And his pitch to Mrs. Hayes is a masterclass in psychological manipulation. He preys on her socioeconomic anxiety. He sits in this working-class home in the West Bottoms and tells the struggling mother that the odds of her daughter Martha living a long, prosperous, healthy life in this corrupt city are statistically near zero.
Basically telling her the system is rigged against her.
Right, but then he pivots. He tells her that Martha possesses a divine spark, and he promises that while the odds of a good life are low, the odds of her living forever, of achieving true immortality, are a mathematical certainty if she's chosen for his work.
It is a phenomenal twist in characterization. He frames his atrocities as a twisted act of salvation.
He isn't hunting, he is recruiting.
He uses the cold, rational language of probability to justify the most grotesque biological architecture imaginable.
It changes your entire relationship with the villain as a listener or reader. You aren't just scared of his knife, you are terrified of his intellect.
Yes.
You are scared of his ability to sit in a room with a mother and rationally argue that dissecting her daughter is statistically in the girl's best interest. It makes the horror intellectual rather than just physical.
It also highlights the tragic irony of the situation. The police ignore the marginalized victims because they don't value their lives. The curator targets the marginalized victims because he claims to value them so much that he wants to make them immortal.
Both the heroes and the villain are using the victims as a means to an end.
So what does this all mean? We have the physical trauma of the detectives, we have the bizarre mechanical flesh evidence, we have this terrifying psychological profile of a man calculating the odds of immortality.
But there's one more thing.
There is one final, crucial detail buried at the bottom of the evidence log that blows the scope of this entire investigation wide open.
You're referring to the stained glass fragment.
Yes. When the forensics team swept the 9th floor observation deck, amidst all the mud and blood and industrial tubing, they found a single polished fragment of antique stained glass.
Out of place entirely.
And the lab analysis determined its origin. It didn't come from a church in the slums. It came from a specific historic window in Quality Hill.
For context, this is a monumental geographical and narrative shift. Up to this point in the series, the entire hunt has been hyper-localized in the West Bottoms.
Just trudging through the mud.
The slaughterhouses, the dive bars, the threat was contained to the underbelly of the city.
Quality Hill is the exact opposite of the West Bottoms. It is the upscale residential district sitting high on the bluffs overlooking the river.
It's where the old money, the politicians, and the elite live.
It's a completely insulated world.
This raises an important question about the curator's shifting methodology. The series Bible notes that early on, the police brass and the mob both wanted to shut Detective Sullivan's investigation down.
Because it wasn't their problem.
Exactly. Because the murders were only affecting the bottoms. It was poor victims, marginalized women, transient workers. The power structures of the city felt completely secure, ignoring the problem because it didn't affect their odds of survival.
But the piece of stained glass proves the killer is no longer confined to the slums. He is actively sourcing his parts from the upscale residential districts.
He is moving up the social ladder.
The odds have suddenly changed for the city's elite. The insulation that money and power provided in 1964 Kansas City has evaporated.
The monster isn't just in the industrial labyrinth anymore. He is knocking on the heavy oak doors of mansions in Quality Hill, still smelling of old blood and wet wool, looking for premium biological material for his next assembly.
He's gentrifying his victims, which brings us to the ultimate chilling realization of this specific narrative turning point.
The big takeaway.
That masterpiece that Sully and Marcus found. The biological horror that completely broke an old-school mob cop's mind and left a brilliant young detective obsessively tapping out the rhythm of a failing mechanical lung. That wasn't the climax of the story.
Far from it. The evidence log clearly labels the modified iron lung as a prototype.
A prototype.
The entire horror show on the 9th floor was merely a proof of concept.
He was just testing his theories. He has proven to himself that his biological architecture works. He can graft the pieces together, and he can will it to live, even if just for a few hours.
And now, armed with that success, he is scaling up his operations.
He's heading to Quality Hill to pick out high society parts to build the next, more permanent iteration of his map.
It really is a phenomenal demonstration of suspense writing. By combining hard, tactile forensic clues like a heavy, wheezing 1950s respirator and a shard of elite stained glass with the intense emotional trauma of the characters, the writers created a multi-layered mystery.
It never talks down to the audience.
It respects your intelligence by laying out the pieces of evidence and letting the terrifying implications dawn on you organically, right alongside the detectives.
It forces you to look at the psychological wreckage and put the puzzle together yourself. And before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over on your own.
I love this part.
It builds on everything we've dissected today from these original sources.
We keep coming back to that overarching theme of behavioral probability, the curator's obsession with calculating the odds of human action.
Right. So consider this. If the curator's entire methodology is based on predicting behavior, and he specifically engineered that 9th floor reveal to leave his journal scrap explicitly stating, Marcus saw the eyes, he knows.
Yeah.
Is the detective's current trauma actually an unpredictable emotional response? Or is Marcus's exact reaction, his obsessive focus on the mechanical rhythm, his deep dive into the engineering of the beast statistically calculated?
Oh, wow.
Is Marcus's broken psyche not a byproduct of the horror, but an invisible engineered component of the curator's next grand assembly?
That is a deeply unsettling proposition. It asks whether the detectives are actually hunting him or if they're just moving exactly along the pathways of the map he already drew for them.
Are they playing the game, or are they just pieces on the board, something to keep you up at night?
Definitely will for me.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the shadows of 1964 Kansas City. We love exploring the architecture of these incredible narratives with you.
It's been a blast.
Until next time, keep questioning the odds, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.